Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen. Very special guest this week, Mr. Jamitkowski. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Happy to be here. About time we actually got to talk officially. We chat all the time, but
I know.
Yeah,
absolutely.
How are you?
It's long overdue. Very good. Good to have you here.
Good.
Like you said, been looking forward to this for quite some time. So happy to take a deep dive into your career.
All right, let's do it.
So, let's go way, way back to the very beginning. Growing up as a young child, as a young adult, when did you first discover pro wrestling?
My father and I used to watch pro wrestling probably when I was in middle school. It was about when I started. And I go on record to say that to me, professional wrestling was WWF. I didn't know, NWA. I didn't know any of the territories. I didn't know any of that stuff. Only time I would ever hear of them would be like when I would travel and you'd pick up the wrestling magazines, like the old After magazines. And then I would see like the Ric Flairs and the Dusty Rhodes, but they basically didn't exist to me because I never saw them on TV. But my dad and I, we used to watch like the old Tuesday night shows and the Wednesday night shows. I remember on Sunday, Sunday never officially started until you watched Mean Gene on All American Wrestling on the USA Network. And then I vividly remember, the first WrestleMania and trying to figure out how to watch it. I never saw the first WrestleMania live. I didn't watch it on closed circuit. But I actually saw WrestleMania 2 at the old Rockingham racetrack up in Salem, New Hampshire. They did closed circuit in the clubhouse. That's where I watched WrestleMania 2. Yes, that's how Dad and I, we used to go to the house shows at the old Garden. So that's kind of how I got into it.
And did you kind of fall out of wrestling as a fan? Because I know you said once you got into the chaotic days, you were not much of a wrestling guy.
No, I never fell out of being a wrestling fan. I think that was one thing I've always kind of kept, even to this day. I still watch it. Now I tend to watch more clips and sitting down and watching a full 2-hour Raw, 3-hour SmackDown. But no, I've always stayed a fan. When we started Chaotic Wrestling, when we were running Chaotic Wrestling, was it a little different? Yeah, probably. We watched it differently. We looked for different stuff. We were maybe watching for different reasons. But even back then, I was always very fortunate that because of other interests I had in Boston, even during the Chaotic days, any big shows that came to Boston, whether it was like Mania 14 or when there was a Rumble or whether there was I forget what other ones they did. There were different pay-per-views or what are they called now? PLEs, different pay-per-views or Raw. We would always have, I would say 9 times out of 10, we would have a luxury box and a whole bunch of us would go to the shows. So I always stayed a fan.
Awesome. So you have lots of fond memories of growing up in the pro wrestling world. So growing up as a kid, what were some of your hobbies? Were you into sports, stuff like that? Kind of to give us your background.
I mean, it's no mystery, but one of my hobbies is, if I lean to the side, is I have always been a huge comic book fan, a big Batman fan. So I actually, at one point, I had a comic book collection. I think I had 21,000 comic books, which is absolutely ridiculous. I collect Batman stuff, as you can see behind me. I was also a sports fan. I was very fortunate. I always said, through my sophomore year of college, I actually played certain sports. And I always said a huge compliment to my dad, besides getting me into wrestling, is I always said that my dad always made me good enough. I was I was never good enough to make like varsity teams or play sports professionally, but I was always good enough at virtually any sport that I could, not embarrass myself at a barbecue or a beach. So, in terms of playing sports, yeah, I played sports through about my sophomore year of college. And then I realized at that point that there were people who were not only better than me, but people who took it much more seriously than me. So I kind of waned off of that. And then also, I mean, as you know, if you grow up in New England, the day you're born, aside from, I think that the day for me, the day they christen you in Boston is also the day they declare you will always be a Red Sox, Patriots, Celtics, and Bruins fan. So obviously I followed them. And I tell the story now all the time that now that I live in LA, when it comes to sports, I'm like a pilgrim in an unholy land out here. People will be like, oh, you live in LA now. Are you a Dodgers fan? I'm like, F off. No, I'm not a Dodgers fan. The only time I was a Dodgers fan was when they played the Yankees in the World Series. Then it was legal to be a Dodgers fan.
So 21,000 comic books, when you're at that level, what are you doing for storage, number one? And what are you doing to keep track? How do you know which ones you have and don't have?
Well, back when I started, I'm old. We had these things called notebooks, and you'd literally just write everything down in a book. But you bought comic books. It was a great store, and shout out, they're actually still there, Salem, New Hampshire. Salem, New Hampshire. Chris's Comics. That's where I started collecting, and they would sell all the supplies too. You'd buy boxes, you'd buy bags, and you'd bag them all. You'd bag them by title, and then over time, they started to create software. Like I remember my first, I forget what it was called, but like you'd get a CD and it was comic book software that you'd put in what titles you had and it would give you a value. Then it went online and it went virtual. So that's how we would track it. I was unique. I never collected for value. Even some of the stuff you'll see behind me in different things I do. I never collected for value. I will always say that of the 21,000 comic books I had, I probably read 19,000 of them.
Wow.
I collected because I enjoyed comics. And then I got a collection because I just didn't throw them out.
Right.
So that's kind of how I collected. I never collected for value. I just collected what I liked. And even now, I was in New York City recently in Midtown Comics, like one of the biggest comic book stores in the country. And I was there with a coworker of mine, and we were and I was like picking, like you can see these ones behind me. There's like those white covers back there. Those were limited run. DC did some limited covers that I got in New York. And the person I was with, he's like, I don't know why you're getting those because those aren't going to be worth anything. And I'm like, dude, I just like the covers. I think they're going to look cool on the wall behind me when I do podcasts. So that's still kind of how I collect stuff.
Awesome. Now, when it comes to business venture, what was your very first business venture? Was it chaotic or did you do something before that?
I have a very weird background when it comes to business. So I went to Ithaca College. I graduated with a communications degree with a concentration in advertising and public relations. And a minor in public speaking. From there, I worked in hospitality for a while, hotels and restaurants. Then my master's is actually in hospitality from Cornell. Fans of The Office can insert your Cornell jokes here. But yeah, I went to Cornell, I got my master's in hospitality. Then I worked in hospitality for a bit. I was actually a corporate trainer. I was working actually out here. I was working out here in LA for an offshoot of Disney for a little while. And long story short, what happened was a vice president over at the Disney stores transferred back he took a job in Boston, or in actually Needham, Massachusetts, as a vice president of training. And he wanted to bring his director of training with him, a gal named Jen. And Jen was born and raised in Southern California. She said, no, I don't want to move to Boston. It's too cold there. But Jamie, who has my exact same job in the other division, he's from Boston. So this guy, Kurt, reached out to me. That's actually how I ended up back in Boston. Once I was back in Boston, the funny thing is, now you leave for a while, then you come back. A lot of my friends had moved on. You lost touch. Facebook wasn't a thing. So, there was really no way to like track people unless you kind of knew somebody who had kept in touch with somebody.
Right.
Even at that point, like cell phones were still kind of in their infancy. So, you didn't have a whole iPhone full of contacts. So the people, my best friend Milo still was still in the area. So obviously he and I reconnected. We had never not connected, but we kind of got back together. And then a bunch of his brother's friends, Dan, were big wrestling fans. So we would get together and start watching the pay-per-views, like Sunday nights, once a month. I'm sure we'll get to him, we'd go to Randy Miller's house and would watch pay-per-views. And that was the impetus of chaotic wrestling. On the flip side, my family also had a company. It was called Undercoverware. If you're familiar with direct sales, there's Mary Kay, there's Avon, there's all those big companies. My family did home lingerie parties. My mother was actually the very first person ever to do a home lingerie party. My mother, as crazy as it sounds, in the 80s and early 90s, my mother was on the Phil Donahue show. She was on Oprah twice. My family, as the story goes, my family was in fact on the Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. So it was this crazy thing. And so I think it was 98, 99, somewhere in there. My parents took a step back. They went into semi-retirement. They moved to Hawaii. I took over Undercoverware. So now concurrently for those 18 years, I was running Undercoverware by day and Chaotic Wrestling by night.
My goodness. Wow. And which one would you say was more lucrative?
Sorry, I also do a spit take out of my Spider-Man corksicle bottle. Yeah,
It's an easy one.
safe to say that it was the lingerie company that
Yes.
definitely was more lucrative. Yeah.
Yeah. Little rib question there for you. So, the birth of chaotic wrestling, how does that come about? And, tell us about who's involved.
It started the way so many things start. It was a bunch of us watching wrestling, all in our late 20s, and we were all starting to make money in our lives. We all kind of we're all in that like second or third job where we're starting to make some money. We're all starting to buy houses, buy condos, and one day Randy Miller said, we should start a wrestling company. I think his exact words were, we should buy a wrestling company. And we said, all right, we're on board. And he had found this, I think the guy's name was Tom, who originally owned Chaotic World Wrestling. He had found Tom. I think Randy had been to some indie wrestling shows. Randy and my buddy, the person I mentioned earlier, his brother Dan, they actually did something. They did an outdoor show either in Rhode Island or like, where did they do the old hot dog safari? Was that
I had never been to that. I only heard about it. That might have been
maybe Suffolk Downs, one of those. It might have been where it was. Okay. But they worked some weird little indie show where I remember Randy was a master ref and Dan refereed a match. And that's how it all kind of came together. But it was really just kind of a silly 20-something idea of we should own a wrestling company. I would say it was the equivalent of it. I think in our mind originally, it would be the equivalent of maybe starting a golf league or like a poker group that meets once a month.
Okay.
That's kind of how we started. It was not meant to be anything. It was just a silly hobby that we wanted to try.
And by purchasing that from that gentleman, what did that come with exactly? What were you getting for that?
We paid. There were four partners at the time. It was me, Randy, Milo, and Matt Young. We each put in $500. So for $2,000, we started Chaotic Wrestling, and we got the name Chaotic World Wrestling, which we immediately changed. We got a stretcher, like a green army stretcher. We got a ring bell, and we got a notebook full of contacts and information.
Wow. Okay. So do you still have that ring bell to this day?
No, we lost that ring bell. We had that ring bell for a long time, and then we broke it. We actually had to buy a new one. So,
gotcha. Now, when it comes to the ring, when did you get your first ring? Where did you purchase that?
Geez. So for the first few years, we rented rings from Anthony Rufo, Ali Muhammad. God, rest his soul. He passed away a few years ago. Yeah. But we used to rent his ring. He had a little I think he had ours was 18. I believe he had a 16-foot ring. Then I forget who else we would rent a ring from. We had two guys we would rent from. And then we decided to buy one. And I actually don't remember what who we bought our first ring one. But we bought two. Because that would have been, okay, now I got it. I believe that was when we started the CTC. When we started the Chaotic Training Center, that was when we bought our first ring. Mike Hollow was involved in where we bought it because he would have had the contacts from Kowalski.
Okay.
And our first two rings, I think if you talk to some of the veterans in New England, there are two things that they will never forget. It will be our first two rings and our big orange crowd control barriers. Because our first ring, those things were brutal. They actually, the way they were constructed is, I'm sure you get this all the time with your involvement in wrestling. And whenever this topic comes up, people always say to me, oh, well, it's a big mattress. No, it's not. No. Those rings, they're big steel frame, and whatever the construction is, then you got the big planks of, we had 2x8s, big planks of wood going this way, right? And what about that much padding on it? And then you use the canvas with canvas with the ties to pull it all nice and tight. Then you got the ring ropes. Again, ring ropes. Ours were steel cables wrapped in a garden hose, wrapped in tape.
Right.
And our first rings, again, this is what anybody will remember, is we had a center spring. So our later rings, the rings we got later, they were called flexi beams. So the way the newer rings were constructed was you had the steel frame, then you had also steel beams that went across. But those steel beams actually kind of slipped into little notches. And those middle beams, they stretch. They're actually like, they have a curve to them. So that when guys would bump, the whole ring flex, hence flexibeam.
Sure.
Our first ring didn't have flexibeams. They were solid beams. And in the middle, there was a center spring with a bracket that caught the middle. Any of our guys will tell you those things were stiff as hell. God knows I never took bumps in there. But over time, what would happen is that sometimes as that spring got older, it would seize and it would no longer bounce. So
Okay.
all of a sudden, guys would be trainer, even worse, guys would be in the middle of the show. And all of a sudden, that ring doesn't bounce anymore. There's no give to it. And they were just bumping on just a piece of steel that was rigid in the middle. So those were our first rings.
Oh my goodness. Now that process, you're selecting the superstars that you want to appear. Obviously, you were famous for, being the first and I guess only to do the contracted talent. So when that came about, how do you go through that selection process? Who are you going to choose? Because, you don't have a background like you have said before in independent wrestling. So how do you know who the top guys are and how did you
We
select them?
didn't. That was
Okay.
our problem. We didn't. When we first started, we didn't understand, and this is not a knock on anybody we signed to contracts. I want to be clear on that. Rich Palladino and Randy Miller, they kind of picked our first group, our first contracted group, and those guys built the foundation of chaotic wrestling. The One Night Stand, Ronnie Delicious, and Edward G. Ecstasy. Ironically, last year at Cold Fury, when I went to the Chaotic Wrestling Hall of Fame, crazy Chase Del Monte walks up to me and he introduced me to this young lady on the roster. He's like, "Do you know who this is?" I'm like, "I got no idea." It was Edward G. Ecstasy's daughter.
That's right.
So that was absolutely insane to me. So it was One Night Stand. It was Ronnie D and Edward G, Gino Martino, Ali Muhammad, Louis Ortiz, Kyle Storm, Rich Palladino, Tiny the Terrible. And I feel like I'm missing somebody in there, but that was our core group. Great group of guys. Again, they helped us build chaotic wrestling. What we did was Rich and Randy said, these are the best guys in New England. And we took them over. We said, you're just going to work for us. In theory, I still think it's a great plan. If I were to do it today, it can still be done. I still think it's a valid business approach. It's a strategy. What we didn't understand at the time was that in general, for indie wrestling, people don't necessarily come to see the talent. They come to see the brand.
Right.
So when we took all these guys, at the time it was Primal Conflict, it was NWA New England, it was Sheldon, New England Championship Wrestling, and there was one more that I can't remember off the top of my head. But we had 4 major competitors. When we took those guys away, it didn't matter. They just filled in other people, and NWA fans, the Primal Conflict, they just kept going to those other shows. Yeah. And that's what we didn't understand about wrestling. So I think, can the contracts work? Yes. We also made the mistake of not knowing the market. Okay. It's like a really bad sports franchise that overpays for talent. We didn't understand the market. So when guys told us, "Oh, we're making $100 a show," okay, what we did was we paid them $500 a month. That makes sense if you're going to do the math, 6 to 7 to 10 shows a month. It doesn't make sense if you're only going to run 1 show a month or 2 shows a month. Now you're paying guys to sit around and not work for somebody else, but you're not benefiting. That was a piece we didn't understand. Again, if 2026 Jamie could go back and talk to whatever was 2001 Jamie, I would say your strategy's okay, but you need to fine tune it a little bit.
And was that just a 1-year deal for all of those talents?
It was sort of a 1-year deal. Yeah. It didn't go much longer than that. I think we killed some of them early. It became a point of contention all the way around.
And once you got out of, using specific talents like that, how did you branch off and start to book other talents from other areas?
There are certain eras of chaotic wrestling. So you have the foundational era that we just talked about. The next piece would have been what I would call the Kowalski era, or I guess the CTC era. Shortly after that, we had started working with, obviously through Louis Ortiz, we knew some Kowalski guys. And the first, then we met like John Walters, Vince Vicalo, Arch Kincaid, April Hunter, Slick Wagner Brown. When we met Mike Hollow, we started using more Kowalski talent, and our shows, everyone will tell you, our shows changed. Okay. The Rhode Island crew, they had a different style. Kowalski had more of that WWE style or WWF style. Kowalski was a renowned trainer. He tended to have, at the time, everybody. Oh, Aaron Stevens was the big one I just glossed right over. But if you think about, if you've been around long enough, Aaron Stevens, John Walters, Vince Vicalo, April Hunter, Slick Wagner Brown, Archie Kincaid, they had a look. They looked like professional wrestlers. They looked like athletes. A very different style of athlete, very different style of wrestler. So when we met Mike Hollow and we decided to transition to the Chaotic Training Center, that's your next era. And so our shows changed. We went from having more of that old Primal Conflict or ECW feel to much more of a WWF or WCW feel.
Right. Yeah, I believe I managed, I want to say it was Chaotic Wrestling early on, and it was the Golden Buddha, which was Mr. Biggs under the mask.
I'm sorry.
It was the Golden Buddha versus Short Sleeve Samson, and they were feuding at the time, and they threw the mask on me, and I was Wailu Bamboo. I was the manager of the Golden Buddha for maybe 2 matches, and that's an early memory for me. But I believe that was Chaotic Wrestling. But
that sounds a lot like Chaotic Wrestling. I'm glad you had that opportunity, and I apologize to everybody involved. When I said I was leaving people out, Short Sleeve Samson, he was also one of the original crew as well.
Yes. What were some of your personal memories of Anthony Rufo, the late Anthony?
Anthony was probably the nicest guy we met originally. And I will say about any of those guys, Gino, Anthony, Ronnie, and Andy, what they all did early on was they knew that we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And I've seen it since then. I've seen a lot of promoters try to start young kids with dreams that they're going to be wrestling promoters. And as I got to know wrestlers and know guys, I would hear guys in our locker room talking about, oh yeah, I'm working for this other guy and he's paying me $150. I'm like, why? We were fortunate though. Anthony, Gino, they never took advantage of us. Okay. The contracts, that was us. That was our doing. They had every right to say, yes, sure, we'll take free money for a year. At the same time, though, they never took advantage of us. So, Anthony, big thing he would do, he taught us literally what wrestling rings were, how to put them together. He and Gino talked about helped us how to build feuds and all that stuff, the stuff they would do with the one night stand. That's what those guys did for us. They literally taught us how to be wrestling promoters. And God bless, they never, ever, ever took advantage of us, which is huge.
And when you were putting together that initial roster, what was your cutoff point? When did you realize, okay, we need X amount of talents? Was there a certain point where you're cutting it off, or did you just kind of
again? What's weird, Joe, is I've become the voice in the face of Chaotic Wrestling. Really, in the beginning, it was Randy Miller. Randy Miller did everything. I was the production guy. Again, I think because of my degree at Ithaca, I was able to edit video still. And this is when digital editing first became a thing. I was more marketing. I was video production. Randy did everything else. Randy worked with the talent. Randy was the booker. And so I wasn't involved in all that stuff up until now we bring the Kowalski guys on board. Now we have the CTC. Now we bring in a new partner. Now it becomes a business. And that's where there was a switch. That's where ownership decided that this was no longer going to be, the owner's fantasy booking fed. We're going to turn it into a business. If we're going to do it, the quote I use all the time, and I get this from my parents, is in life, whatever you do, if it's not fun and it's not profitable, don't do it. Okay. So something can be fun. Look, I golf almost every weekend. I rarely win tournaments. I rarely win side bets, but it's fun. So it's fun, but not profitable.
Yeah.
Chaotic Wrestling was at a tipping point because at that point it was neither fun nor profitable. We needed to make it one or the other. And we leaned into, let's make it a business. So when things went ass over tea kettle with Randy, that's when, honestly, by default, it was like Game of Thrones. Somebody killed the king. Who's next in line? I guess it was House Jamitkowski. And that's how I stepped into the role.
Wow. So your friend, who also was a partner, as you said, Milo Masterson. What
Hmm.
memories can you share of Milo over the years? And obviously, he was an
He's
on-air personality as well as a commentator.
he's a jackass. He's dead to me. No, he was over my house on Sunday watching football. He lives out in LA. He lives in Long Beach. We live up north of LA. We are still the best of friends. Um, Milo enjoyed it. He liked it for fun. He never. I didn't realize that Milo wasn't there very long. I want to say he was gone by like Cold Fury 3. He
Okay,
had
wow.
left. There was another partner who we always have to mention, Ben Lentini. He was somebody I knew from the company I worked for as a corporate trainer when I first moved back to Boston. Ben and I knew each other from there. He was a business plan guy. So I reached out to Ben and brought him on board. And Ben was the guy who really engineered the whole WWF deal. He was the one that got us on track, like with things like budgets for shows. I could probably still find our old chaotic wrestling. We had a break-even sheet for every show that would break down. Here's what our talent is. Here's what all our costs are going to be. Here's how many tickets we need to sell.
So early on, when you're first putting that promotion on the map, how are you deciding which venues you're going to go to? And obviously, it was very territorial at the time. So how are you choosing, not to step on people's toes by going to certain
We
places?
didn't.
How did you decide that?
No, we didn't. No, stepping on people's toes. Come on. You baited me on that one because you know as well as anybody, you've been around New England. No. I can honestly say that there was probably about a 10-year stretch that among other promoters, I was probably the most disliked person in New England because I didn't care. And when I say that, I truly mean Randy and I were different. Randy was out for blood. Okay. It's a strategy. I'm not saying it's a bad. He was out for blood. He wanted to go after people. Ben, Milo, and I, our strategy, and eventually Mark Beaudry, adult, our strategy was different. And to this day, I was actually just texting with somebody over the weekend about another promoter in New England right now. And I said, he reminds me a lot of me in chaotic wrestling. He does his own thing and he ignores everybody else. That was my strategy. I ignored everybody. People would say things, we would ignore it. People would book things, we would ignore it. When it came to venues, I didn't care if people ran there. If we liked a venue, we would go after it. I mean, we Lowell PAV, which was our home base for the better part of a decade, we took it from another promotion, not out of spite, but because it was a perfect location for us. And again, read between the lines. My last name is Jamitkowski. I'm Polish. My father's a Polish veteran. He served in Vietnam. When I wanted to get that building, I called my dad one day. We were at undercover where I'm like, hey, Dad, I need you to come for a beer with me. He's like, why? I said, we're on the Polish American Veterans Club. And I walked in there and I'm like, hey, I really want to book this place. Well, we got this other company. And then my father banged out with, he's like, wait a minute. I'm a Polish American veteran. Can I rent the hall? I'm like, yeah. And that now they start talking. Now, sure enough, they're all from Merrimack Valley. They all know each other. He knows people who knows people. And that's how we got the PAV. But we didn't care about that stuff. And it wasn't that I wasn't targeting people. I just go back to, I just didn't care.
Yeah.
That's how we went after talent. That's how we went after venues.
And you had that success in mind. You had the go-getter attitude. As you go in full force like that, was there ever retaliation from any of the other promotions without mentioning names?
Yeah, all of them. Again, as you know, we were pretty tight. We tried to encourage our roster to work mostly for us. There were incentives for mostly working for chaotic wrestling or only working for chaotic wrestling, especially once we had the CTC and the WWF relationship. Absolutely, I leveraged it. You could certainly go and work for Sheldon or Sparta or whomever. But if you did understand when WWE needed extras, you might not be on the list.
Yeah.
Just the way it works. So yeah, there were a lot of things said about me. But again, we built, all of us. I think that as we went along, me, Ben, Milo, adult, then you get into like our team around us. Todd Sinclair, Eric Mucko Arsenal, Mike Crockett, Tarzan. I keep going through all the names. What we did was the difference with us is we had relationships with everybody. We built relationships. I always said, Any other school in New England for the better part of a decade, if they got a call from Vince or talent relations vice president of the week and said, we have one contract, who from your school is going to take it? Any other school in New England, the owner would take it for himself.
Yeah.
For us, we always would have picked our best student. And that was our difference. So we had a loyalty. You'll notice. I mean, Joe, you'll get to it. I never appeared in the ring. I never appeared on. I appeared on WWE TV once, in the background talking to Slick Wagner Brown, ironically in Eddie Guerrero's last vignette. It was in Worcester, where they needed bodies in the background. So I was one of those guys in a suit talking to Wags. And I never appeared. Why? Because if they called, I remember when they wanted at the Garden, it was they wanted John Cena's baseball coach, right? And the two stories I'll tell you where it's like they wanted John Cena's baseball coach. I would have been perfect. I called Gino Martino first. He didn't want to do it because at the time he was starting to get more attention as like the extreme strongman head bashing guy.
Sure.
He thought it would have hurt his brand. And we end up giving it to Johnny Vegas.
Right.
The other one was Tommaso Ciampa's spot when he was Undertaker's lawyer. I remember it was me, Tommaso, Hollow, Taker, Stephanie standing in a circle in Worcester. And they had called me that morning. They said, we need a lawyer. And I brought Tommaso, Matt Logan, Chase Del Monte, and I all drove down in my car. I said, put on your suits. Story goes, we always just tell guys when WWE was in town, pack in your trunk, have your gear, a suit, and all black clothes. Because those would be the three things they would always want from us. And I would be ready to get to Providence, Worcester, Boston within 2 hours. And our whole crew is trained to have that stuff in their trunk when WWE is in town. That day I got the call, called those three guys. We met in Lowell. I think we met at Undercover Wear. Drive to Worcester. I remember staying in that circle. And they thought Matt looked too young. Chase Mave looked a little young at the time. And I remember Taker turning and he looks at me and he goes, you look the most like a lawyer. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And Taker said to me, he's like, I can give you the spike. You just have to jump. And all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap. Am I going to take a tombstone on national TV? And thank the Lord that Stephanie looked at Tommaso and said, no, wait a minute. I think we can make him look more like a sleazy lawyer. Because Tommaso kind of had that long hair. And if I remember what they did was they slicked his hair back and they gave him the little glasses. And to this day, I'm like, I am so happy that Tommaso got that spot. Not only for him, but for me. Because I would have somehow blown it. And I would have,
Sure.
been on botch mania for a decade. But
Right.
That was our thing. And when we talk about the trust, we never took the opportunity for ourselves. We always tried to give the opportunity to people in the company.
Was there ever a talent that you were hoping to get for the roster and it just never came together? Maybe they had a different schedule or moved on.
I'm sure there was. I don't remember at this point. We always had conflicts. There was one guy who, notoriously, first time we booked him, he made an excuse. Second time we booked him, I think he no-showed. And then we tried to book him a third time and he tried to take us for more money. And I said, F that guy. We never used him again. So there was stuff like that. We had somebody who was on our roster for a stretch. And then we had an angle going. And I remember I said to him that the bookers came back to it was Tarzan and maybe Tarzan, Malone's and Crockett at the time were kind of tag teaming on that. And they're like, oh, so-and-so's not available for Friday. I'm like, why not? He said he didn't have the dates. And Joe, one thing about us is what made us unique was we would let our roster know all of our dates in October of the previous year. So we would book our venues. We'd have our dates. We'd have our whole schedule. Now, admittedly, sometimes in there would be a Saturday night to be determined. We didn't quite know where we were going.
Sure.
And we would tell everybody, hey, we might add and some might go away, but lock in these dates. Our roster knew that we were good for it. If we took away a date, we'd make it up to them somewhere down the road. So once this guy told me, oh, he didn't have our dates, done. And it was always tough to push me to really be done with somebody, but that would be the kind of stuff that would get me.
Yeah. So, you're comfortable with the role now. You're a few years in, per se. When it comes to venues specifically, what were some of your personal favorite venues to work out of?
Oh, The PAV, look, I don't like to drop names and sweep them up behind me, but there are guys in WWE who still like have fond memories of the Lowell PAV. It was the greatest room because look, as much as we've built it up over time and reputation and history has been kind to us, look, there were some shows where we drew 75 people. We had some bad crowds along the way. But the great thing about the PAV was whether you had 75 or whether you had at one Cold Fury, we somehow put 325 people in that building. We broke every fire code. Thank God nobody dropped a cigarette because we'd all be dead. I don't know how we fit that many people in there. We were friendly with everybody in Lowell. That's where adult Mark Beaudry was so valuable. He found us the PAV. He was from Lowell. His grandfather was actually mayor of Lowell. So he would know all the cops. He'd know the fire. He'd know people. And they would cut us so much slack. I mean, the licensing board was so nice to us in Lowell. And that would actually be, well, I'll tell you that's for a minute. But Lowell PAV, by far, greatest building ever. You put 75 in it, but my point was it always felt full and it sounded full. And it looked great for when we would film stuff for, it's if not probably back then, not social, but maybe it was like YouTube or DVDs or that kind of stuff. The PAV always looked great. It had a huge locker room. At one point we had a locker room upstairs, downstairs. I had my little corner. The boys had they had a kitchen. Everybody loved us. That was by far, hands down, our favorite venue.
And your personal memories, and why don't you give us the background of Mark Beaudry and his involvement with Chaotic Wrestling over the years?
Mark was a fan. He started coming to our shows, liked us. He started helping at Cold Fury 1, the original he started helping at Cold Fury. He was setting up chairs. And Milo Masterson, at the time, Mark Marchand, Mini, was also helping. And Milo was trying to get something done, a banner hung or something done. And he yelled, "Hey, Mark." And they both turned and said, "What?" And Milo got frustrated. He goes, "Okay, from now on, you're Mini Mark and you're adult Mark." And we're 26 years later. And everybody, he's in my phone as adult. Everybody in wrestling knows him as adult. He was a fan. Then he started helping out more and more. And a couple of years later, he could tell you the year better than I can. I said to him, why don't you come on board? And he put in a couple of bucks. And adult is he's a belt nut. He loves belts. And I'm pretty sure that whatever money he put in, we used it. That's when we upgraded our titles too. We used adults and fusion. And I will say, I said it at the Hall of Fame induction. I say it in every interview. Were it not for adult, Chaotic Wrestling wouldn't have been where it was. I got to do all the sexy stuff. I did the WWE. I did the WWE meetings. I did all the big stuff. I did the master plans. That being said, I would leave almost every summer. I had a young daughter. My family lives in Hawaii. I would leave. Adult would run the company. Once I kind of got going, I never really set up a ring again. I never drove a ring truck. And yet I never set up a chair. I never did a ticket. And yet somehow every single show we ran, there was a ring, there were chairs, there were barriers. Fans knew where they were, and that was all adult. Also, stealing a line from Bruce Pritchard. For 15 years, anybody who worked for Chaotic Wrestling would happily take a bullet for adult and give it to me instead. He was everybody's guy. He was like the dad of Chaotic Wrestling. I could probably pull up texts right now and tell you, on any given day, adult will send you just random dad jokes. And this goes to this day. We haven't been involved in Chaotic Wrestling for over 5 years now. And anybody who was involved in Chaotic Wrestling, we all have the same story where all of a sudden we will get random texts from adult for no good reason. I got this one when I was away over the holidays. "Hey, I was curious. Is it true you can't say hi to the ocean in Hawaii? I was told you can only wave." Yesterday I saw an ad on TV that said, "TV for sale, $1, volume stuck on full." I thought, I can't turn that down. This is what he does. And everybody in Chaotic Wrestling, so everybody loves adult, but literally adult Chaotic Wrestling would not exist were it not for adult doing all that stuff I couldn't or wouldn't do.
Right. And it's nice to hear about those people, behind the scenes that are really so influential in keeping things together and aren't talked about enough, So I think it's good that
It's
he's,
funny you said that, Joe, because when I was thinking about talking to you today, one thing I wanted to say was it's like every interview, uh, and again, I've done more interviews lately than I did when I ran Chaotic Wrestling. And that goes back to our strategy of we didn't talk a lot. We kept to ourselves and we did our thing. There are so many people that like never get mentioned that did so much. Mike Crockett, we kind of glossed over him. Uh, Todd Sinclair, Eric Arsenault. I'll start with those three. Eric and Todd, that when Randy left or when Randy went away, uh, Eric and Todd stepped up to be our bookers and our writers, not because they were going to make any money, but because they cared. They wanted to see us do better. Mike Crockett did everything from referee on shows to any graphic you saw produced for over 10 years. Every poster, every website, every Facebook, everything. Crockett made those. Every T-shirt, every autograph sheet. Then for a number of years, he was a booker or a writer or helping out the booking crew. He was one of my advisors. He'd be one of the guys I would bounce stuff off of. Hey, can I do this? No, you can't do that. Those guys. Tom O'Gara and Ethan Gilson, just two guys that Milo found at Emerson, who they were a production crew. We had no production. Then all of a sudden one day, Milo finds Tom O'Gara. And next thing you know, I got 5 Emerson students showing up. Ethan Gilson, who happens to be a lighting and sound guy. Next thing you know, we're building cages. Next thing you know, we have lighting. Next thing you know, I have 3 cameras at every show. Now I have an editor for when we used to have TV. Then you get to, all of our announcers from from Milo to Simon Gregory to RJ Deloise to Johnny Fabulous. All these people, I cannot gloss over Rich Palladino. Rich, the only person who was there from day one. All these people who just contributed to Chaotic Wrestling because they cared and they wanted to be a part of it. I think that's what made us different. Yes, I think we took care of people, but at the same time, we made everybody a part of something, and that's what made us special.
And fast forward several years, just kind of skipping ahead a little bit. Obviously, you mentioned it already. You were inducted into the Chaotic Wrestling Hall of Fame. Why don't you let us know about that process? The moment you found out, what your thoughts were, and then the night itself.
Yeah, the way I left Chaotic Wrestling was weird. Chase and I had been having conversations. I knew I was done. Was it like probably 2017? I think I knew I was done. Part of my problem was I'd come up through Chaotic Wrestling and through like I said, there were eras. There was the originals and there was a Kowalski era. Then there was what I called that golden era, where it was like that's when Handsome, Tommaso, Chase, Logan's, Malonis, they all came in, right? Then we kind of had that WFA infusion, Fury, Nikki Rocks, Alex Arian, probably one of the greatest things, Sean Gorman. Then we had that era. Then we kind of had that NEPWA era when you start to see Scotty Slade, Mark Sherman, Mercedes. That's when Sasha Banks comes in. So there's been a whole flow. By the time we got 2017, I didn't connect with the era anymore. There were guys on our roster who were my daughter's age. Most of the guys that had been with me were gone. Wasn't feeling anymore. Go back to rule number 1. It was definitely not fun anymore. And my wife, Cheryl, was one who called it out that I started dreading going to shows. And not in a fun way. I still remember the story where the PAV, I'd gone away, took some, it's like the first time I ever officially took time off. I told everybody I need a break. I forget how old my daughter was, what was going on in life, but I need a break. And I went away for a full 6 months. And my first show back was at the PAV, and I walked in and the smell hit me. And I'm like, oh, I remember this place. It was the smell of, stale beer, old cigarettes, and broken dreams. And it hit me, but it was like a fun, like, okay, I'm back. It wasn't fun anymore. Combine that with I didn't know my own roster. And things had changed. Indie wrestling had changed. We didn't have as much control. I felt that a lot of the guys on the roster didn't have respect for the company, didn't have the respect for me. Chaotic was just another date on their calendar. And I decided to walk away. At the time, Chase Del Monte was working with me as the booker. He and I started talking. I said, I think I'm done. And he and I reached a deal where he and Brian Fury were going to step in. When I left, I didn't like the way I left that much. I was in a tough spot. I would have booked my own exit differently. I would have liked the opportunity to let Adult and I say goodbye properly. And on that last show in December, that didn't happen. I was in a tough spot. At that point, it was mostly their company. They'd been doing everything. Chase and I stayed in touch. It was probably like a year and a half or 2 years later. He and I met for lunch in Lowell. And we were talking about something. And I said to him, I'm like, yes, I was really bummed that last night. He's like, why? And I kind of told him why. And the look in his face, he was like, oh my God, dude, I had no idea. It wasn't malicious. He was just like, you could tell in his eyes, he was like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. So flash forward to about a year ago now, when he called me and he's like, hey, we're bringing back the Chaotic Wrestling Hall of Fame and we want to put you in. I cannot be more grateful to him for that. Didn't have to do it. Still, nobody in the crowd really ever knew me. I never appeared in my own ring on purpose. Hall of Fame was the first time I ever stepped foot in my own Chaotic Wrestling ring. And spoke to the crowd. I am forever grateful for him allowing me to do that. For giving me an opportunity to say in front of a Chaotic Wrestling crowd at Cold Fury what Chaotic Wrestling meant to me, what the people who were in Chaotic Wrestling meant to me, and to finally be able to give what I felt was a nice goodbye. That meant the world to me. So I think I will always be grateful to Chase for letting me do that.
What would you say is the most challenging part of being in the wrestling industry?
I think especially at the indie level, it is the most unnecessarily cutthroat. I think they're just all right. I think it's the delusions of grandeur in wrestling, and I think what people sometimes forget is because a good portion of our business is scripted. Is so many people forget that it's a work on every level. Like you have promoters who start to believe they're more than where they are. Brian Malonis and I have always had this one conversation. For all the interviews we talk about for Chaotic Wrestling, for all the people who've gotten to WWF, WWE, and gone on to great things because of Chaotic Wrestling, at the end of the day, Chaotic Wrestling and I, we are merely a comma, maybe a semicolon in the history of professional wrestling. And we realized that very early. So many others, they're just delusional. I mean, so many, whether it's wrestlers who think they're over because 17 people in Fall River popped because they did a corkscrew half a Corona that didn't make sense. Or you're a promoter who, because, in this town, we sell out an arcade once every 6 weeks. And by standing room only, because you put out 25 seats, okay, yeah, I guess if 30 people show up, it's standing room only. Congratulations. But they think they're bigger than they are. That's what got to me, is that level of delusion and forgetting that it's a work.
And speaking of work, looking at all the work that you guys had done with Chaotic Wrestling, your entire time there with the company, if you could pick 3 matches, what would the top 3 matches in your opinion be?
I don't remember, Joe. I don't remember matches. I don't remember anything. Every time I talk to somebody, like if I slip the other tab, I have cage matchup just in case you ask me about a show. Okay, I'm gonna remember like bad stuff more than anything. I can remember certain shows. Like I remember Cold Fury 12. I think was the first one we did. We did it like Drake It High, and that was the night we had like 800. I think we had 800. Adult would know the number. 800 plus people in Drake It High. And the cool thing about it was we didn't have one name on the show. Wow. 800 people showed up to see Chaotic Wrestling. Yeah. So like when I talk about a night, that was a big one. When we did the stadium show for the Lowell Spinners, what the hell did we call that one? Wrestling Under the Stars, maybe. I don't remember. That was a cool night just because we had been in Lowell for so long. Yeah. To actually almost fill a stadium, that was cool. And to bring in all those names. I mean, the Cena match, we've talked the Cena match to death. We all know about it. Go on YouTube. It's on there. Yay, Vince McMahon was in the ring. Huzzah. That was a great night. like I remember, I remember like little stuff along the way, and a lot of it is like I said earlier, it's like stuff that doesn't get mentioned. Like Psycho, we never talk about Psycho in interviews, and yet Jared, who played Psycho for God, better part of a decade, he was one of the most over guys in New England. We could have put we still joke to this day, we could have put the belt on him any day and our crowd would have accepted it. And Psycho had more entertaining matches where he didn't do much, but they loved him. Um, I remember Danny E, who's when we had the Blow Up Boys, against Fred Sampson and Rick Fuller in a feud. JFab was Sampson and Fuller's manager, and Blow Up Boys were these little guys. Danny E, he's a ref in WWE now. Alish, what's her name? Alicia Edwards. Alish was their manager, and the whole thing was they had the titles. Big guys were chasing them, and the story goes is like it was. They kept cutting promos, and here come the big guys, and they'd run away. And what we finally said one day is, I remember we were kind of sitting there, we were just bullshitting. I'm like, all right, I said, here's the new deal, guys. Rick and Fred, if you can get to the ring, if you can catch them, you can do whatever you want to them. And Rick Fuller's chops are legendary in New England. Yes. And their eyes lit up. And for like 3 or 4 shows, we had these epic things of like no longer a work, now it's a shoot of Rick and Fred trying to get these guys before they could get away. I mean, there's a famous clip somewhere of Danny E. Rick almost had him by the ankle, and we were in low. He ran, top rope jumped, leaped out and over, like into the second row of the PAV crowd to run away so Rick wouldn't chop him. I mean, I remember stuff like that. I can remember somebody we never talk about, Ilya Markopoulos. Ilya started with us when he was like 14. He had no business being in a wrestling ring. His parents used to drop him off at the CTC 3 times a week. His mother would sit in the lounge and read a book. And we had Ilya and Alex Arian were the Golden Greeks. We did a chaotic countdown. And they had this one kid in there with them, Dan Murphy. And Dan thought he was Hulk Hogan. And it's a rumble, it's a countdown. And I will never forget, Dan's in there, and what's his name? Alex gives him his old running knee. So the Golden Greeks are in there, and Alex gives him the running knee. And the whole thing was he's going to give him the running knee. He's going to sell down. Ilya was going to pop him out. And then they were going to, as a tag team, they were going to wait for the next. I think that part of the booking was they were going to wait as a tag team for people to come in. They were just going to keep tossing people.
Sure.
Gives him the running knee. The kid sits up and hulks up. Alex turns and is like, what the hell is he still doing in the ring? So now gives him another one. Kid does the exact same thing. Now you can hear somewhere on tape, you can hear Alex Arian yelling, will you effing sell? Ilya, meanwhile, has powdered to a corner. He's laughing his ass off. But I remember stuff like that. I don't remember specific matches. But yeah, I mean, the memories are just go on and on and on.
Yeah. Obviously, like you said, you didn't appear in the ring. You weren't a public figure within the company. But as far as like fan interaction, was there ever a fan interaction that you still remember to this day, whether it would be, something nice backstage or, in the crowd before the show?
Our fans were awesome. We had the most loyal fans. And like I said, Adult was their best friend. And I knew them sort of, kind of. But our fans were awesome. I mean, we had one fan in Lowell, Barry, who he was a big fan. He worked for a local pizza place. And all of a sudden, like every third Friday in Lowell, 10 large pizzas would show up in the locker room because Barry would go to the pizza place. We had fans, the Shermaniacs. We haven't brought up Mark Sherman much. He had the Shermaniacs who were a couple, and they were like, they were kind of like graphic artists. They would make T-shirts. They would do side work for us. I mean, the level of support we had. And I know that there's still, she still works at Org Chaotic. Candy, she's Candy Lynn. She's awesome. Like we had the best fans in the world who would show up just week after week to watch our foolishness.
And what are some of your personal memories of Randy? Obviously, he was a friend and, went on to do the business with you. But Randy Miller, let's hear more about him.
It's unfortunate what happened with Randy. I don't know what happened to this day. Randy, I think Randy and I, we were friends because we both knew Dan. We kind of knew each other from high school, but we had a link in the middle. And we started this, and I just think, I don't want to speak for him. I think Randy started Chaotic Wrestling for different reasons. I think he wanted to be the Vince McMahon of New England. And again, 50 something, 54-year-old Jamie, all these years later, I realized the ridiculousness of that. It gets back to what I said about other promoters. We were guilty of it at the start too. When Randy left, it was because we had brought Ben in. Randy was booking for Randy. And I remember what the breaking point, no pun intended, was. It was a show in Methuen where John Walters and Vince Vicalo were the tag team champions, and Randy was going to have them lose clean to Skunk O'Malley and Grub. And Matt Grabowski, he was this good kid. He had a couple of different gimmicks with us. Nice kid, came up through CTC. But he was green as grass. And he wanted to put them over clean. And we're like, that doesn't make sense. We can't do this. He's like, no, you don't understand. We're going to use them to mule the titles. And he kept saying, I'll never forget the term. No, you don't understand. They're going to be the mules. We're muling the titles. And I'm like, and I don't know about you, Joe. I've never really heard that phrase other than Randy saying it in 20 something years of wrestling. And we stepped in. Ben, Milo, and I all said no. That night in Methuen, I remember Randy came in, had the booking sheets, threw them on the table. He said, "Here you go. I guess you guys are in charge now." I was the one who I went to his house and met with him, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And he said, "Do you people honestly think you can book better than I can?" And I said, Randy, that's what, no, he said, and he could be very direct, and he was a sales guy, and he pushed. And I said, yeah, I do. I think we can book better than you can. And that was it. And that was almost the last time I spoke to him. He never came back. I bought him out a few years later. He actually moved down to the Dominican Republic. I bought him out a few years later. We met I can tell you the last time I spoke to him was right before Cold Fury 10, so we can do the math. I met him for lunch at Burton's in North Andover. We kind of talked, and we kept it somewhat friendly. And I said, hey, Cold Fury 10's coming up. And for that one, for the Chaotic Countdown, we brought back people from the beginning. So we had Jay Gillette, Donnie Rotten, Gino, Ali. We had a bunch of guys, the originals, come back for that one. And I said, hey, a lot of the old guys are going to be there. I said, do you want to come by? I said, do you want to come? And it was more like, do you want to make an appearance? Like, do you want to do something at Cold Fury 10? He looked at me in the eye and he said, why would I want to do that? I'm like, okay. Wow. And honestly, that was the last I heard from him. So not a great situation. I guess somebody else who hates Chaotic Wrestling, Jamie. There's a list of them.
Get the list out. Well, obviously you've worked with so many stars over the years. What was it like kind of seeing all those old faces from the early days of Chaotic again?
It's always fun when I see guys again. Whether it was that group, seeing them from back in the day, or going back. I mean, a lot of my friends now, again, it's funny to think that I've been gone 2017. It's been, we're approaching 7 years now, 8 years, whatever, do the math. Since I left, a lot of my good friends are still wrestlers from Chaotic Wrestling. I mean, most of my group chats yesterday during Patriots game, there were 3 different group chats going on. One was with the New Age Insiders, who were the podcasters, who they came in. Again, another group of guys who had no stake in Chaotic Wrestling, but came in and said, no, we want to help you hit the better button. And they took over promotions. They took over production for no reason other than they wanted to be involved. But it was with them. Another one was like Brian Fury, Adult, and Mike Webb about the Patriots. Then there's like Duke Dalton and Malone. So it's all my good friends. And when I come back there, it's so funny. When I come back to New England for a week or 2 weeks, I would say 2/3 of my schedule is usually trying to meet up with people from wrestling. So that's like group one. And then obviously there are the faces that we see on national TV every week. And for me, it's funny that like I almost disassociate. Like sometimes it's tough for me to realize that the Kofi or the Matt Bennett or the Tommaso Ciampa that I'm seeing in the ring, on Netflix, is the same guy that used to be at the CTC on a random Thursday night,
right,
or a random Saturday morning.
What is the most rewarding moment been for you owning a company like this?
There are 2. The first story I've told before had to be at least a year ago now, where I turned on Monday Night Raw, and the first 7 segments of Raw, every segment had somebody who either came out of Chaotic Wrestling or had worked for Chaotic Wrestling, which was amazing to me. The thought that, holy crap, the biggest wrestling show in the world, the first 7 segments all had somebody who had been in Chaotic Wrestling or worked for Chaotic Wrestling or come through Chaotic Wrestling. That was number one. The other one, and this one I actually, as I've matured and I look back and I've kind of had more context again, I love how many people that came through Chaotic Wrestling are now like running and operating like promotions of their own in New England. Obviously, Chase Del Monte with Chaotic Wrestling, Chase is like I could in some ways argue that Chase, even with the WWE people, Chase is like the biggest Chaotic Wrestling success story. Because here was this nitwit Villanova graduate whose gimmick was a Jersey Shore knucklehead, who now he's running what I still consider to be the best promotion in school in New England. I mean, I will go on record and say the school, the NEPWA, what he's doing there is absolutely bigger and better than anything we ever did as the CTC. The students he gets, the way when I went back and they showed me how they rebuilt, it's amazing. So I think Chase is a huge success story. You know, you've got Scott Reed, Mike Hollow. They're doing WFA up in New Hampshire now. Another one though, like you've got, I know Adam Barasano, he works with them, but Ilya Markopoulos, I think he's working down. He's one of the trainers at the Beyond School now, if I remember correctly, or one of the schools. I just love seeing how many of our people are now involved in other promotions and helping run other promotions. I'm being a little bit careful with what I say, because like I know some of the guys, like they're helping the owners, they're bookers, they're this or that, but I'm not sure who knows what anymore. And I don't want to get angry texts from anybody, but I would say, like I said, they're the two sides. There's the WWE side, which is the obvious one, but like I just love the fact that the Ilias, the Chases, that all these people, they're now doing it for themselves now. They're doing what we used to do. That's what makes me happy.
Rewarding. So what would you say is the best piece of advice that you've received within the wrestling business?
Oh, everything I ever learned was from Jim Kettner. And we could do another hour on just things Jim Kettner taught me. Jim Kettner taught us how to run a show, how to book a show, how to treat talent on the good side and the bad side. I remember Jim when merch started to become a thing and people could produce their own merchandise. We used to control all that. Now, all of a sudden, we got everybody showing up and setting up their own tables. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And I was ready to tear them all down. And Jim pulled me aside and he's like, hey, look, I was also cut from the Jim Kettner cloth of how to pay guys. I was not the most generous promoter in New England. And Jim said, look, you don't pay them that much. What does it hurt you to have them make their money on the side? And he was the one who told me, stop it. This is not a hill you die on. So Jim taught us so much. Probably the biggest thing Jim taught me was when it comes to promoting, and this is a booker, don't let the crowd, it's going to sound so weird. Don't let the vocal minority of your crowd control what you do with your shows. Remember for a while, and you still see it now, and I think it's started kind of with the Raw takeovers, the Raw After Mania takeover, when the crowd would almost start to dictate what happened.
Right.
A lot of times what would happen is you get this vocal group where somebody would find you, and all of a sudden you get these sweeping generalization. You get a bunch of college frat boys who'd show up and they'd start to derail your show. And because they were loud, what you would do is you would tend to feed into them like, oh my God, should we be doing this? And Kettner was always the one who would say, if you start feeding them, you're going to lose your core crowd. So if anything, counterbook to what they want to see. Because really, you don't want those fans. Those fans will hurt your business long term. But like I said, I go on and on about the stuff Kettner taught me. Kettner's a genius when it comes to independent wrestling and promoting.
Yeah. And that was the next thing I was going to touch on, actually. Jim Kettner, obviously, his contributions to Chaotic Wrestling for a while there, you kind of switched things around, got him involved. And why don't you tell us all about that behind the scenes, kind of how that
was Tom Pritchard. He stepped in When he was head of talent development, he suggested that we basically build our own territory. So it was us, it was Kevin Knight down in New York, New Jersey, and that was Kettner down in Delaware. And what that created for us is we go all the way back to the contracts. Here's where it would have made sense. What we were able to do is we were able to say to all of our best guys in Chaotic, in ECWA, and in, I think it was IWF. Does that sound right? Yeah, IWF. And those three promotions. What we were able to say to our best guys is, look, you no longer have to go work for other people in your specific area. Because on the weekends where we're not booked, one of the other two has a show. Go work for them instead. So we were able to, it was twofold. We were able to keep our core people. We kept their schedules full, taking away the need to go work for our competitors. And at the same time, we all of a sudden had exclusive talent pools that nobody else could see. So if you were in New England, you couldn't see Fred Bone Crusher Sampson anywhere except Chaotic Wrestling. You couldn't see the Chick Magnets, the Blowout Boys, Scotty Charisma, this guy named Roman. So that's what that created for us. And that's how we met Jim. And then Jim just became just on every level. He became like, if this was a Godfather movie, Duvall's character, he was like Richard Duvall's character. He was like the consigliere for Chaotic Wrestling, is he would kind of guide us. If we had WWF meetings, Kettner would guide us. Proposals, Kettner would take a look. He'd tell us what to do. Dealing with talent, that was his job. He was amazing. He is. And I just talked to Jim. Jim's birthday is the day before Christmas. So I just talked to Jim a couple weeks ago. So Jim is still, I don't want to put him in past tense and people think something happened to the guy.
No. Yeah. Jim's a wonderful man. I mean, he's, like you said, brought so much to the industry, so much to the business. You know, he brought a lot of magic to St. Matthew's Parish Center and really, turned that into a big deal down there. So,
and if you've never met Jim Kettner, just picture Joe Pesci, right? Like Kettner is Joe Pesci.
Right. That's one way of looking at it for sure. So moving on to, obviously Dr. Tom Pritchard, Jim Kettner wanted to do the territory angle there, which was quite a success. Moving on, what was your favorite era if you had to choose from Chaotic Wrestling?
It's probably that one. Yeah. It's probably that one. Yeah. I mean, like that Cold Fury 5 through 10, 11 in there. I mean, just it was great. Handsome, Malonis, Chase, Logans, they're all coming in. Tommaso, Max Pelham. I don't want to gloss over Max. It was just the guys who were there to help build Chaotic, and they were getting spots on TV. They were getting opportunities. They were going to tryouts. They were traveling with each other. And we just had such a tight knit group. Yeah, that was it. That was the golden age of Chaotic. I'm terrible with years, but like those years just had so much in them. That was the homecoming show with Cena. Those were the big Cold Furies. We talk about toward the middle there. You get Fury, Nikki Rocks, Alex Arian, just such a good group. We had so much fun.
Yeah. Now, what would you say is your Mount Rushmore? Chiming in your inner fan, Mount Rushmore. It's a double-sided question. So you got on one side Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling in general, any era.
Okay.
And then Mount Rushmore of Chaotic wrestling.
All right. Yeah. So we'll do Mount Rushmore of any era. So are we talking, is this any definition, or do you want my favorite? Okay, so we'll do this. I mean, I think Mount Rushmore, it's got to be Hogan, Flair, Cena, Taker.
Okay. Yeah.
Not necessarily I'm also, so I'm a huge, like my top four are probably like Bret Hart's number one, Randy Savage is number two. My guilty pleasure was always Ultimate Warrior. I was embarrassed to admit that for years. So my personal top four is different.
Sure.
Than the Mount Rushmore. But I think those four, I think, I technically should replace Taker with Austin, because you caught me off guard. Okay. So it's Hogan, Flair, Austin, Cena. Those are my four. Okay. End of that one. Oh man. Now, are you just trying to get me heat on Chaotic Wrestling Mount Rushmore?
Okay, gotta make it interesting, right?
All right. All right, I'm close. So I've got Brian Malonis, He's an easy one because, again, he was core chaotic for a long time. He was the guy, he's our heavyweight champion. Tag. Bruen was a guy you could do anything with, and he was always credible. He's also one of my really good best friends. But I just think his contributions alone to chaotic wrestling, Malonis is on there. Handsome Johnny Warbeard, whatever you want to call him. Again, same reasons. He was there at the beginning. He and Malonis, they were both trainers for us. They did everything for us. Oh God, you're putting me in a tough spot because I know what I'm going to do with the last one. I'm going to give the nod to Chase because of where he is now. He runs Chaotic Wrestling. So again, I think his story is probably the most complete Chaotic Wrestling story. And the fact that he started off where he did, he was a champion. He did this, he did that. I give him that nod. And the fourth one, oh man. All right, so I think Brian Fury could be on there again, because I think he was the first one that brought something different to Chaotic Wrestling. I could throw John Walters in that spot too. He was the first true athlete that we have. Gino Martino could be an original, but I'm actually going to cheat, and I'm going to say I'm going to throw an underrated name that nobody would expect me to say. My fourth would probably be the Logan brothers. Logans were with us for a long, long time, and I think Logans were probably the best tag team in New England for the longest time. They were always a part of Chaotic Wrestling, but never get mentioned in these conversations for some reason, and yet they probably should. And if you know Brian and Matt personally, I think the journey they've taken in their personal life has been amazing over the past few years. But Matt and Brian were always two guys. They were always there. They were always solid. They were never unprepared for a show. When they showed up at the school, they were always ready to go. They never half-assed anything. So I think if you were to say to me, okay, if I had to build Chaotic Wrestling, I'll take it away from Mount Rushmore. If I had to like rebuild Chaotic Wrestling now around certain people, yeah, it would be Handsome Malonis, Chase Logans, Brian Fury. If I could have that little group there, I'm good to go.
Awesome. Well,
if I could have all those guys back, I think I could once again take out any promoter in New England.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. What'd you say is your biggest takeaway from your time in Chaotic Wrestling? Biggest takeaway, most important thing learned?
Biggest takeaway was the friendships. I said that earlier.
Yep.
By far, friends I've made. Every group chat, every visit home, those are the people I go to see. One of my best friends in the world, adult, is through Chaotic Wrestling. Malonis, all my good friends come from Chaotic Wrestling. Last time I was home, I was very fortunate that Cheryl and I, and you notice I don't mention my wife a lot because she and my daughter removed themselves from all things wrestling. But last time we were home, we spent the Sunday afternoon at Brian Fury and his wife, Nikki. We spent the afternoon at their place watching a football game. When I'm fortunate enough to go back during Mania season, I've watched Manias at Malonis, at Fury. So it's the friendships. And my biggest takeaway would be, or a piece of advice I would give anybody would be, and this is just in business. My real job now is I'm a business consultant. My first question I ask anybody is, what's your goal? What do you want? What are you trying to do? Whether you're a wrestler, what's your goal? If you're joining the NEPWA, which again, plug for them, best wrestling school in New England, the former Chaotic Training Center, Chase Del Monte, Chaotic Wrestling. If you want to be a wrestler, go to NEPWA. But if you're going there, what's your goal? Your goal doesn't have to be to be a WWE wrestler. Maybe your goal is just to work local shows and have fun. Maybe your goal is to use wrestling to get in better shape. Maybe your goal is just to be involved in it. Great. As a promoter, what's your goal? Is your goal to be the next WWE? Is your goal to be the biggest promotion in New England? Is your goal to be 4 friends getting together and having fun every 3 weeks and fantasy booking? I don't care, but you need to have a goal in order to progress, in order to achieve. If you don't have a goal, then you're like one of those inflatable things outside a car dealership that Bailey used to enter. You're just flapping in the wind.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how big your goal is or how small your goal is. Have a goal, and now you have something to work towards. And our goal going back our goal was to be the biggest, best company in New England. And I'd like to think that that's what we achieved, because that's what we worked towards.
Right. And it may be hard for you to pinpoint a certain year, but what would you say was Chaotic Wrestling's busiest year? Most shows ran, just the most work put in for one year.
It's
Was
got
there
to
a
be like
calendar?
that. Like 2007, 2008 would be my guess off top, like somewhere in there. Because
Yeah.
you can't see. I don't keep a lot of. I keep different memorabilia around. Like the belts are in or my home office. I'm in my other office, but I do have the Cena homecoming poster, like right there. You can't quite see it. And looking at that, I would guess those are probably our busiest years.
Yeah.
But we were honestly, we were pretty consistent. I mean, if I were to pull our old show schedules, we had it down to a science. Like every year, we pretty much ran the same number of shows every year, give or take 2 to 3. I mean, it's funny if you remember, like when you would go to Staples, the big desk calendars are like 3 feet by 2 feet.
Right.
Like we literally, I can tell you, me and Crockett, we would sit there with one of those and we'd start in pencil. It would be okay. When do we want the first show to be? This Friday. It would count 1, 2 weeks off, Friday. 1, 2 weeks off, Friday. 1, 2 weeks off, Friday. Oh shit, that's Good Friday. We don't want to run Easter weekend. Back it up. And we'd sit there for like an hour and a half marching through it all until eventually we'd get it laid out. Then we'd say, okay, where are our double shots? Where do we want to do it back to back? Then we'd start to add in Lowell, Woburn, Methuen, Littleton, New Hampshire, Dover, Derry, excuse me. And that's how we would do it. So when you say what was our busiest year, I would say there was probably like a 7-8 year stretch when we had Chaotic Wrestling and the CTC, where that's the biggest thing, Joe, is when I do take pot shots at other promoters who say, "Oh, we've been in business for 30 years." Okay, yeah, but let's do cumulatively. What I was saying was, other promoters they go on how long they've been in business, but literally, like they don't run shows for 8 months. They disappear for a year. They go on hiatus. We never took a break. Every year it was 2 weeks off, another show, and we laid it out. And I think that's what got Chaotic where it was. It was that consistency, because it was consistency and trust for us, for our fans, for our roster. We all knew we weren't going to deviate, and I think especially for the roster, they knew they could trust us.
Right.
So.
And right now in pro wrestling, on the indie scene in New England specifically, it's common ground to kind of see, the big stars come through from, former WWE talents or whatever it may be. But early on for Chaotic Wrestling, you guys brought in the Hitman Bret Hart, which was not so common back then. What was that experience like working with Bret?
Joe, there's a term in wrestling that I'm sure you've heard, and we were accused of being money marks. And that was probably one of our biggest money mark moments, was paying Bret. Like, I think we paid him $5,000, which in hindsight wasn't that much. But yeah, we wanted to bring him in, and it was actually a mess of a show because there were thunderstorms. He was late. He was supposed to do a signing before the show. And then we had to do the signing after because his flight was delayed, and it was 1,000 degrees in the building. And it was, but yeah, whether it was Bret Hart, that wasn't done back then. If you were to ask me, were there any errors we made? I give a lot of credit to NEW. What's the guy's name that runs NEW? I'm so sorry. I forget his name.
Mike Lombardi.
Mike Lombardi. I give a ton of credit to Mike Lombardi and NEW, that he was the first one to kind of recognize, hey, if I get all these people who aren't under contract but are still recognized, I can do these big stadium shows. And I give Mike and his promotion a lot of credit. I think that was one that we missed. That was an opportunity that Chaotic missed. Like you said, we had it early because we did use Bret Hart, Tony Atlas. We used Bundy. We used Spike Dudley. Spike Dudley was our tag team champion for a little while. So we did it early. And I don't know. I'm trying to think back. It might have been because of the WWE relationship, we were afraid to touch guys that had been released, or am I just trying to make an excuse to make myself sound smarter, that I just missed it. I missed an opportunity. That was one that I think that's probably the biggest one we missed was, we used to do it with the Bret Harts and them, that we had an opportunity that we missed. We should have continued that.
And did you do, I remember being at a show, and I thought it was Chaotic Wrestling. It's so long ago now. Wonderland Dog Tracks with Ricky Steamboat.
Oh, we did. Yeah. Dragonfire. Yep. That was our first named show.
That's
Dragonfire.
right.
Ricky Steamboat. Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot about that. He was, boy, one of the nicest guys I ever met.
That
Ricky
was
Steamboat
probably the
was
year
one of the nicest
2000
guys I've ever
around
met.
there.
Yeah.
Great guy, right?
I saw him like years and years later. Ironically, I'm in Hawaii. I spend a good chunk of the year in Hawaii. My family lives there. And my father's friend, Bob, he's like, WWE was coming to town. And Bob's like, I want to bring my grandson. I'm like, okay, great, I'll get you tickets. And then my father calls me. He's like, so for the show, he's like, 4 tickets. I'm like, oh, cool. You know, Bob, who's Bob bringing? He's like, you and I are going too. I'm like, why? I'm like, fine. So I remember I called Ann Russo Gordon. I'm like, hey, Ann, blah, blah. I said, I need four tickets to your show in Hawaii. And she goes, for who? I go, for me and some friends. And her coach is like, you're going to Hawaii and you're going to go see one of our shows? What's wrong with you? I'm like, Ann, just please. So we go, and the 4 of us, and I'll never forget. Like, I figure we're going to be, first loge back. It's a small arena in Hawaii. And we have front row seats. Like, we're right on the railing.
Oh.
And like, first match, who comes out first? Kofi Kingston. Here comes Kofi down, high fiving. He gets me, and he dead stops. He goes, boss, what are you doing here? I'm like, don't ask questions. I'll talk to you. So we talk. But my whole point of this was, that was after, remember Steamboat did a Legends thing with Jericho?
Yes. Yeah.
He worked Jericho in the main that night in Hawaii, hometown. And so after I went to say hi to some people, and Ricky was there, he remembered me from when he'd worked for Chaotic Wrestling 20 odd years, like 15, 20, and just as nice that day. It was like seeing an old friend. He's one who's like that. And the other one who, again, not to do a huge name drop, Cena's the other one who's always been like that. Out here, I was at the Mania in Orlando, and I went to visit some people at the Roster Hotel. And it was funny. I bumped into John again. And every time I've ever interacted with him since then, the John I bump into is the exact same John that rehabbed his knee at the CTC 25 years ago. So,
wow.
Cena and Steamboat, they're 2 of the good ones. And Kofi, he's a good guy too.
So marketing and presentation has always been big to me. Let's talk about the Chaotic Wrestling logo. I feel that the logo itself is actually one of the best logos for an independent organization. I really do. And it's just catchy. It really catches the eye. Kind of tell us how that came about.
That's a great logo. That goes back to, we dropped Chaotic World Wrestling because Randy, and again, credit to Randy, his view was, it was 2 things. It wasn't world. Our championship, if you notice, it was a Chaotic Wrestling Heavyweight Championship. It wasn't world. Because if you're only running in at best 3 or 4 states, you can't have a world championship. And he thought Chaotic World Wrestling was bulky. And back then, everybody was using 3 or 4 letters. So it was WWE, ECW. I'm sorry, WWF, ECW, WCW, NWA, PCW, or then NECW or NWA, NE, all those, right? Randy felt that if we cut it and we just called it Chaotic Wrestling, 2 options. You either call it CW, which is slightly different, 2 letters, and the network was not a thing at the time. Or, and this is what I thought was genius by Randy, you have to call, because CW also doesn't roll off the tongue. So what are you going to do? You're going to call it Chaotic. And notice, any conversation we've had, you, me, nobody ever refers to it as CW. Everybody calls it Chaotic.
Yeah.
It was brilliant branding by Randy to get people to call it what we wanted it to be called. The logo came around, or originally we were going to have 5 partners. John Irving was going to be our 5th partner. He kind of backed out, decided he didn't want to do it. But his mother actually owned a marketing and branding agency. And so Randy and John were best friends since like childhood. So his mother's firm actually designed that first logo. I love that logo. I will tell you, nothing against Chase and the current Chaotic logo, the gray. I'm sorry. Chaotic Wrestling with the Flames, greatest logo. Yeah. I was known, John Walters will still give me heat to this day, that when I owned Chaotic Wrestling, I had more logoed pullovers, fleeces, turtlenecks, you name it, I would slap that logo on. But I will tell you this, Joe, that whenever I would travel with it, people would stop and talk to me about it.
Yeah.
Because that logo, the flames, everything, It was great. I love that
Yeah.
logo.
No, it catches the eye, and that's what you need,
If I wasn't so afraid of needles, and if I could ever get a tattoo, I would get the Chaotic Wrestling logo tattooed on my arm. But
There you go.
until they create needleless tattoos, we don't have to worry about that.
Right. So who would you say was the heart and soul of chaotic wrestling if you had to kind of pinpoint somebody?
I mean, that's a bad question. Adult, I think. Adult, because I can't say myself because that'd be way too egotistical. No, but it was the core group. It was me. It was Adult. It was Crockett. It was Fat Pants. It was Malonis. It was Handsome. It was Fury. It was Chase. Like that. I keep bringing up the same names because they were it. And look, talk to Chase Del Monte someday. He and I have had our differences at big levels, small levels. But at the end of the day, all those guys, I can talk to about any of them. We all had our moments along the way. But we were like a weird little family where we could go at each other, we could hate each other, we could talk behind each other's back. But somebody else does it, then there's a problem. I remember we brought one kid in, and I would give my pre-show speech and every show. No blood, no cursing, stay off the barriers, stick to your times, blah, blah, blah. Here's our next show. Here's what's happening. Check your finish. All my usual garbage. And I would have my thing every show. I guess after I was done, I was at the PAV, I powdered to the other little room, talked to somebody. And I guess this kid turned to the Logans and said something like, oh, wow, what an a-hole, blah, blah, blah. And the Logans turned on him. Because I think what happened was I think one of them was kind of giving me crap as I was talking. That's what happened. Somebody, whether it was a Chase or a Logan, they were kind of chirping back at me as we did. And then I left the room and this other guy kind of said something about me. And Brian Logan looked at me. He's like, no, you don't understand. We can say that about Jamie. You don't say that about Jamie. Who the hell do you think you are saying that about? You don't do that. So I think that's why when when you say, who was the heart and soul of Chaotic, it was all of us. It was just that group of, that we keep talking about that same era. It was just that group of us who we were always there and we did whatever it took to make chaotic wrestling successful. I still remember there was a night in Lowell where the guy who drove the ring truck fell asleep. We couldn't reach him and he had our ring. It was our ring. We packed up the night before and that was the last time we ever let somebody bring the ring truck home with them. After that, it stayed at the CTC. But I remember the show was at 8. And the ring got there. I think it was like 7:25.
Oh.
And I will never forget. We had a ring crew, and at this point, Handsome, Malonis, Chase, Logans are all pretty established in Chaotic. None of us did ring crew anymore. And I just remember that night, the ring got there, and I distinctly remember Chase, Psycho, Logans, Malonis, Handsome, literally telling all the young guys, "Get the F out of the way. We're doing ring tonight." And that group, we got that ring up in 25 minutes.
Wow.
Which was unheard of. Because again, it was just that feeling of, no, we're the group that when push comes to shove, everything else goes to shit. That would be the group that would always step up, whether it was be there for a show, be there for an appearance, or put a ring together.
Right. Now, whether it be during a show, out in the crowd, or whether it be backstage or any moment in chaotic wrestling, what would the number one moment personally for you be? Most, gratifying moment in chaotic?
Cena. I mean, it has to be the Cena show. Vince showing up at the show. There was 1,700 fans in Byfield, Massachusetts. John Cena, the WWE, John Cena's there. Vince McMahon shows up. Yeah, that's it. There's nothing better. I've told this, we could have closed the doors the next day and we would have achieved our goal.
Yeah. Doesn't get any bigger than that. That is for sure.
It was ridiculous.
King of Chaos tournament. How did that come about?
Wow, you are testing my memory. We did it twice. The original one, right? Original one, that was like way back in the day, like with Ali Muhammad and all of them, right?
Yeah, he won the trophy. Yep.
You're killing me, Joe. Yeah, that was when our goal was basically to be a lot more like ECW. And that's when we had the Genos, the Ali Muhammads. What was his... John Cronus worked for us back at the time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we had Cronus. So that was kind of our attempt to do like that hardcore thing, which we eventually got away from. Then we brought it back in the later years as more of like a King of the Ring type thing, as a second, as a title holder without a title. But that was our attempt. Wow, you're really stretching my memory. That was our attempt to really lean into the ECW stuff and be more
And
hardcore.
as a promoter, sure. As a promoter, what would you say is your number one quality?
Consistency. We were consistent. Um, I think if you speak to anybody, good or bad, I think they will tell you that we were always consistent with our schedule, with our rules, with our shows, with our expectations, with our presentation. We were consistent. And like I said, sometimes that worked against us. That sometimes made me inflexible. We missed an opportunity, like I said, with that NEW stuff. I remember when Beyond first started doing stuff, somebody came to me and showed me what they were doing on YouTube and the views they were getting on YouTube. And I kind of kiboshed it. Because my thing was, I'm like, that's not number one. I probably didn't understand it, if you want to know the truth, back then. And number two, it just wasn't what we do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I think the biggest thing, our biggest asset was we were consistent, but sometimes it hurts you, makes you inflexible.
So fast forward, now you're the senior marketing manager, the prop store.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. I find that fascinating. I'm a huge collector myself. I'm
Yeah.
into Star Wars and comics and all that sort of thing.
I
So
know you are.
how did that come about for you out in California? And kind of tell us some of the pieces you've seen. And I know
So,
that some of them sell for wild prices.
yeah. So I was very fortunate. I was out here. I was working as an independent consultant, and somebody sent me this prop store listing. And again, goes back to fun or profitable. Here was a job pretty close to me, and I'm a huge movie buff. You can kind of see some stuff behind me. There's more in other corners. Here's this job as a marketing manager at prop store. So I apply. The interview process was ridiculous. It went on, and I ended up getting the job. And what Prop Store does, you can check them out at propstore.com or on all of their socials at Prop Store. They do high-end auctions of authentic movie and TV props and costumes. And we are talking some of the most legendary pieces you'll ever see. I'm hugely fortunate. I get to do a lot of their social reels. I've done a lot of, for the past 3 years, I've done all of their giant events, what we call our VIP preview events at the Peterson Auto Museum here in California. And the pieces you see are incredible. So you're a Star Wars guy. Like, what are your three favorite like franchises? Star Wars,
Oh man, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. I guess Marvel.
Batman, Indie, Marvel. Okay, great. So best thing, so we get all kinds of cool stuff in, and I'm very fortunate that I get to shoot the reels, so I get to handle them. Or I set up the giant displays. And a lot of times, this is where the old chaotic Jamie, the control freak, comes back in, where when I would have to do the display room, internally we had one built, or when I'd do the Peterson, a lot of times we'd kind of get it set, and then I would go in on a weekend and just do it because I know how I want it to look. So it's the stuff we've seen. Indiana Jones's hat and whip. I've seen multiple hats, multiple whips. I've seen his jacket. I may or may not, in the warehouse alone one Sunday, cracked Indiana Jones's whip. I'm not saying I did, prop store.
Sure.
I'm just saying check the cameras. But Lord of the Rings, we had Sauron's helmet.
Wow.
The big giant helmet. We had that prop store at one of the last auctions. I think that was the August auction of this past year. Funny part on that one is I'm not a Lord of the Rings guy. I think those movies are so horrifically boring. And now they call me in to shoot the video for that one. And I didn't know how to pronounce Sauron. Now you notice I'm doing it right now. I was saying Sauron until we're in the little studio, and all of a sudden I hear one of my coworkers shells out. She's like, "You're not saying it right." So now that goes into a 5-minute debate of how to say how to say the name. So I'm like, I'm like, guys, can somebody go on YouTube and pull me a clip so I can hear it said? Well, they pull it out, and the clip they do is Kate Blanchett. She has an accent. I'm like, that doesn't help me at all. So that's my Lord of the Rings story. We did the Batman 85th anniversary auction. I used to have that little thing, right? I used to have the catalog here somewhere. That was amazing. We had all the cinema Batmans. So we had Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer, George Clooney, Christian Bale. We had their suits. We had their full suits. We did that auction at Warner Brothers. So we were in, when you hear that they do like a private screening of a new movie, we were in one of those studios doing the auction.
That's
We
fantastic.
had Alicia Silverstone's Batgirl suit. We had all of Harley Quinn's outfits, Margot Robbie's. I actually tried to get one for my daughter as a Halloween costume, and then it went over $30,000, and I kind of backed off because I thought that was a bit much for a cool Halloween costume. Oh God, what else we have? We've had Batarangs. You said Marvel. I am worthy. I've lifted Mjolnir multiple times. There may or may not be a picture on my phone of me with the great Endgame moment where I had Cap's shield on one arm and Mjolnir in my hand, because we've seen hammers, we've seen shields, but by far the best one is the two best are 2 years ago. Prop Store reached an arrangement with Anthony Daniels, who played C-3PO in all the Star Wars movies. He sold his personal collection through us, and we had his full helmet from Jedi, screen matched to Jedi, which was amazing.
My gosh.
And the cool part of that was, at one point we're at the VIP event, and we have a green room, like a conference room that we use as our office. That's where I set up all my crap for a live event. Yep. And it's starting to sound like chaotic wrestling, Jamie. Again, I had my promoter's corner at the live event. And at one point it just happened to shift where it was me, Anthony Daniels, and his wife alone in the room for like 15 minutes. And I was just talking to C-3PO. And I'm like, 7-year-old Jamie would never believe this. And then last year, this past auction, the last one I did for them, we had Darth Vader's screen matched lightsaber from Empire and Jedi, screen matched. It was the only one where Brandon, the COO here in LA, and we handle props all the time. We're very careful with props. That being said, props do break sometimes. They're old. That was the only one where I've ever seen both Brandon and I actually nervous about handling it. Because it was the piece. It's the most iconic villain from the most iconic franchise, the most iconic weapon ever, and we had it. And you can find pictures of me online holding it, but we all with white gloves handling that thing. And that ended up selling for $3.7 million in the auction. So,
my gosh, that's got to be the most expensive thing you've seen there, right?
Yeah, it is. It is the most expensive Star Wars prop ever sold.
Wow.
Yeah. So again,
how many people get involved in these?
Oh, we have thousands of bidders. Of bidders. And I will say to anybody watching or listening, like, go to propstore.com, register to bid. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to bid. But whether you look, if you have $3.7 million, you want to bid on the next lightsaber, great, good for you. But in every auction, there is day 3. If you're a fan of like Men in Black, if you ask me what I've collected, no, not even, contrary to popular New England rumor, not even I can afford a $3.7 million lightsaber. And if I could, my wife would murder me. But like the stuff I collect, you ever heard of the movie That Thing You Do? Tom Hanks movie?
Yeah.
It's about a 60s rock band.
Yep.
I have 2 of the 45s from that movie framed. I have a Batarang. I don't know if you can see the background. I think he's creeping back there somewhere. I collect smaller stuff, but if you can't afford the big stuff, which one is that? Yeah, there's a corner of a Batarang over there. Yes. It's actually Robin's, but anywho, even if you're a new collector, like, check out propstore.com. They always have like smaller auctions, lower priced auctions. We did the John Wick auction, Umbrella Academy. They have a big one coming up of a popular Amazon show that I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say what it is, but they called me yesterday and asked me if I can go in and shoot the videos for it. Check out propstore.com, whether you're a new collector, an experienced collector. Also, Joe, if you have stuff to sell, you can go to propstore.com and click on the little sell link, and you can send them pictures, and our team will look at it and say, hey, this would be something that would be great for one of our future auctions. So definitely check them out. Propstore.com.
I'm a big Ninja Turtles and Goonies fan as well. You ever see anything Goonies come through?
We get Goonies coins all the time. We had Data's stunt jacket. um, from Goonies, which was really cool because I remember the patches on it. They were just patches that the studio had put on there. And one of them had a history. It was actually the Frank Sinatra studio patch because it was Sinatra spelled backwards, which I can't do off the top of my head. But when I did the video for it, I did it. Been a bit. Goonies, we get the Goonies treasure coins. Actually, I wish we'd done this last week because they just finished an auction last week where they had some of the Goonies treasure coins that are always available. So if you're a Goonies fan, check that out. What was the other one you just said? You said Goonies and
Ninja Turtles.
Oh, Ninja Turtles. I can't give anything away. Joe, you should probably subscribe. Go to propstore.com and subscribe for email updates about upcoming auctions.
Absolutely.
If you're a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan,
sure,
you might want to sign up for updates for upcoming auctions. But no, we've seen stuff from there too. We've seen some of the costumes. Some of them though, like I will say, like some of the older movies, like if costumes are made of latex, they've started to deteriorate. And I can honestly say certain smells stay with you for life. One of them is the Lowell PAV. Deteriorating latex is one of my new ones. Foam and latex is disgusting, but
not ideal.
But no, we've had a bunch of that. Like I said, I could go on for hours as a movie fan about all the cool stuff I've seen at Prop Store. And it's just like so cool. It's like it's legendary stuff, and it's Indiana Jones's hat. It's Batman's costume. I tell people all the time when we had all the bat suits lined up. And look, I'm a Batman fan. I think I started. Oh, there's the catalog. That was the Batman. My shoulder was blocking it. I'm a huge Batman fan. There's bat stuff everywhere around me in this office. That movie, that auction, like the coolest thing was all the suits lined up. And my two things were how small Michael Keaton is and how big Ben Affleck is. Ben Affleck's like 6'3" and broad. I mean, his costume looks, I'm like, holy crap, this dude's huge.
Wow.
It was amazing. And Margot Robbie, I will tell you, her waist is probably about the size of you or me, like our thigh. She is like tiny, but yeah.
So having that inside look and working there, what's the preservation looking like? Like, how do they store everything? And how many pieces would you say are within the facility?
Oh God, there are tens of thousands.
Oh, wow.
They have a huge 35,000 square foot warehouse. I think 25,000 square feet. Sorry, where it's all stored. They have climate control for a lot of the props. But that's actually becoming a thing now. It's interesting. About exactly a year ago, we're in the middle of it's a bad anniversary of the Palisades fire and the Eaton fires out here. There's two giant wildfires we had. And Palisades, that was in the California, it's a kind of an affluent area. It's kind of sandwiched on the shore over by Malibu and Hollywood, and Santa Monica, excuse me. And when that one happened, there were a lot of collectors who all of a sudden got scared because one of my really good friends at Prop Store, he has a giant collection of comic book artwork and stuff. And he lost a ton because he couldn't get out in time. And when I tell you that fire, the Palisades fire was so hot, this guy Chuck, he also had a Viking stove and range in his kitchen. When he went back to his house, it was gone. So think about the temperature that an oven is meant to withstand.
Sure,
it melted. Yeah. The Punisher jacket doesn't stand a shot in that. And a lot of, there's one collector that I talked to. He has a bunch of costumes and stuff, and he has them on mannequins and display cases in his mansion. And he had this horrible realization as he's standing there. He's like, I can't get it out. Artwork, some of the smaller stuff, you can throw it in the back of your SUV. You can pack all your cars. You can get as much. That's what Chuck did. I think Chuck said he lost a lot, but he still managed to get like 80% of his stuff out. The 20% he lost was still millions. But these guys, problem is if you have full costumes on mannequins, and there's a fire, how do you get it out? So I think that's what's happening in collecting now. That was a long-winded answer to. It's something you have to start to consider is how do you store these things for preservation, whether you're a company like Prop Store or whether you're a private collector. Right. I know at Prop Store when a fire was coming close to us one day, like an alert went out and all employees, and again, at certain levels in the company, what we did was We have scan at the company. Everything is barcoded that you scan. So if I take Indiana Jones's whip from the warehouse to the display room to my desk, it has to scan to each location so it can be tracked at any time. Where is it? And I remember when there was a fire coming, what they did was basically it's like starting with the executives and moving down the chain. We were told, go get these props, scan them to your desk, and get them out of the building. So like obviously the COO, he was taking the lightsabers, the Indiana Jones's whips. But I was grabbing stuff like Men in Black stuff. I was getting like $30,000 items to get them out because unfortunately, as crazy as it sounds, even if you have a safe, like a giant safe where we store some stuff, if a wildfire heats up to 20,000 degrees, you have everything you own in an oven. It's awful. So yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
It's incredible. Yeah. Yeah. This is why I moved to California. Jesus.
Yeah. So all the things you've been a part of, so many big things, obviously Chaotic Wrestling, the prop store, you've been a part of a lot of cool things. What is next for Jamie Jamitkowski?
Who knows? I'm going to find the next thing that's either fun or profitable. That'll be it. I've just started, cheap plugs now. I just started a new podcast with our old announcer, Simon Gregory. We have the Golden Geeks Pod. It's at Golden Geeks Pod on all your socials. Check that out. But that's just kind of a fun where we talk about a lot of stuff, everything from pop culture to wrestling to props. So that's kind of a fun one. But I honestly don't know what's next. Our daughter graduates from college this May. So this will be the next evolution of Jamie. We'll see what comes next.
And you're one that obviously likes to kind of be behind the scenes and out of the spotlight, but I got to ask you anyway, fast forward many years from now, you look back at your career as a whole. What do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
I think I want to be remembered as, I'd like to just, in terms of professionally, I would just like everybody to remember me as the guy they liked working with. That's it. Yeah. The guy they liked working with at any level, whether you were ring crew in Chaotic or a prop master at Prop Store or some woman from Dubuque, Iowa, who used to sell lingerie at home parties. I just hope that when you think back, you're like, yeah, you know what, Jamie? I always liked working with him. That's all I want.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for being here and taking the time today. Really appreciate it.
Right. Thanks, buddy. Good talking to you.
Yeah, man, it's been awesome. And for Jamie, I am Joe Bruen, and this is the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments. Love to hear from you, the fans, what you thought of the episode. We will see you all next time.